This is my Honda Jazz, which I bought for £800 and it has no engine.
And that's because last week I removed it using risky techniques with no mechanical qualifications and with only one previous engine removal under my belt.
Now, I've been planning to fit this K20A 200 horsepower VTEC engine into the Jazz because this TikTok comment told me to, but there was a serious problem.
In the previous video, we discovered that this K20 had sustained catastrophic damage to the valve train, meaning that there was a high risk that the engine had metal shavings circulating around it.
This means that this engine may have been a ticking time bomb. So this left me with an engineless Honda Jazz with no engine to put back in it until today. Say hello to the new engine.
This is another K20A from a facelifted Premier Edition EP3, meaning it has a lighter flywheel from factory than our other engine, and it has an AC pump as well.
Now, I know what you're all thinking, this engine looks just as bad, if not worse than the previous one, but it is all about what's inside. So let's crack open this cam cover and cross our fingers and hope it's healthy. Oh, that looks much better, doesn't it?
So for context, this is what it looked like under the cam cover of the other engine. So there was black scoring on the cams and there was that big piece of metal etching in the roller. But now in our new engine, there is absolutely no damage whatsoever. The cams, the rollers and the rockers all look very clean and it just generally looks well maintained, which is a massive relief. So the first task to get this engine in our Honda Jazz is firstly to start stripping it apart, because later on in the video, we're going to be using a special technique to clean all of the major parts of the engine, which is going to make this tatty K20 look 10 times better. And also, just to be safe, I am also going to be changing the timing chain. So I started by removing the inlet manifold. I also took back off the cam cover. I could then remove the oil and the exhaust manifold as well. Now, before attempting the first big job of this video, which is the timing chain, I also had to remove a few of the ancillaries. So to get on a new timing chain, the first step is to get the engine at something called TDC, which is where cylinder 1 is at the very top of its range of motion. We can then lock the cams using this camshaft locking tool, which makes sure the cams stay in the same place. And then we can go ahead and remove the front cover. This is the timing chain. It's one of the most important parts of any chain-driven engine, and that's because the timing chain is responsible for when the valves open in relation to where the pistons are in the cylinders. Now, if we get this wrong and we don't time the chain up correctly, it would result in catastrophic engine failure where the valves would hit the pistons, and that would mean that the thousands of pounds that I've spent on this swap would be completely wasted. But we need to do this to make sure this engine is reliable in the long run, so we can't afford to get this wrong. Now, before removing the timing chain, we firstly took off the sump or oil pan, not only to give this a good clean later on in the video, but also to access and replace the oil pump chain as well. Then I could get on to removing the timing chain, the oil pump chain, and all of their tensioners.
Come two chains. Okay, so we're now at the point where all of the chains are off. That's the timing chain and the oil pump chain, and the tensioners are off. All of the old stuff is down there and all the new stuff is right here. So we need to put all of that on and then we're gonna have a reliable K20.
Before putting on the new parts, we had to scrape off all of the old sealant from the mating surfaces, and then I could get the new parts fitted. That's the tensioners and the new timing chain. But as for the oil pump chain, it turns out the new one I bought was a little bit too small, so I had to reuse the old one. But either way, we got the new timing chain on successfully. After Tom gave it a really good clean in some hot soapy water, I could then get back on the front cover. Now, before doing so, I had to cover all of the mating surfaces with this special sealant, and then I could line up the front cover and bolt it back on. Tom and I then gave the sump a really good clean as well, and to get this back on, we essentially had to do the exact same process as we did with the front cover. So that's the sealant on and then the bolts in.
Right, so I've cleaned up a little bit, but everything now internally on this engine has been done. The timing chain has been fitted correctly and timed up properly, and now the front cover and the sump have been sealed and put back on the engine, so we are getting there. Now, to be honest, this engine swap is one of the biggest challenges I've ever undertaken, especially for someone who's never done anything like this before. There's just so much stuff to remember. I've got so many different parts that I need to make this work that I'm juggling around in my head. It's a little bit like trying to remember all the ingredients that you need to cook your favorite meal. It's not easy. Now, this is where today's video sponsor, HelloFresh, can really help. Not with our engine swaps, but with our diet and making healthy, wholesome meals just so simple and easy. HelloFresh is a meal kit delivery service that offers weekly shipments of fresh ingredients and meals straight to your door, making it so much easier to stay on top of your diet.
So after ordering my HelloFresh, it turned up at my door, and then I was ready to start cooking.
Now, to be honest, I am the opposite of a chef, but HelloFresh provide instructions for all the meals, so let's give this a go. So this is the meal I'm going for. It's the creamy tomato Cajun chicken. Well, I'm actually very proud of myself here. I think this looks really good. I suppose I've got to give it a try. Oh my God, that's really good.
It was so good that I waffled it down in about 5 minutes.
So click the link in the description of this video and use the code JMCARS at the checkout, or scan the QR code on the screen right now. Either way, you'll get a huge discount when buying HelloFresh. And with all of that said, thank you HelloFresh for sponsoring today's video. And I think it's about time we get this engine clean.
So the special method that we're going to be using to make this engine look 10 times better than it does currently is something called dry ice blasting. Now, this should help strip off a large portion of the dirt on this engine and just make it look so much more presentable than it does currently. Now, I even had a quick go at this myself, and I can confidently say it's one of the most satisfying things I've ever done. But I then let the professionals get on with it, and I have to say, the transformation is just unbelievable. Now, these guys are called the Ice Blasters. If any of you want to get in touch with them, I'll leave a link to their website in the description of this video.
So after the dry ice blasting, I have to say this has been completely transformed. So we've got our gearbox, which I don't think I got a pan of beforehand, but trust me, that was filthy. It's way better now. Same goes with the inlet manifold. That looked disgusting. Now it is way, way better. But the engine is the main piece. We've managed to completely strip off the paint on the rocker cover, which means it's now ready for paint.
And the engine block went from a pretty dirty, oily engine block to now a nice, clean, silver-colored engine block, which looks so much better.
So the plan is now we need to get the engine back together. We need to make the Jazz rollable and then put both the engine and the Jazz on the trailer, take it to the exhaust company where they have the ability to weld, and they've also got a lift, which means we can do all of the chassis and subframe modifications that we need to do to the Jazz to make the K20 fit, because it doesn't just fit straight in.
So after arriving at the exhaust company, the first job I got on with was doing something called a chassis notch, which is essentially just making a big hole in the chassis leg. Now the reason for doing this is to make clearance for the engine, as the engine bay of the Honda Jazz is simply just too small. Now that was done, the next step was to remove the subframe, which would help give us all the clearance we need to actually lift the engine into the engine bay, and we need to do a little bit of cutting into the subframe itself as well. Now the reason for cutting into the subframe is the exact same for why we cut into the chassis leg. It's because a section of the gearbox would be touching the subframe if we didn't cut it out, so we needed to do a notch here as well. And I'm aware this is not going to get any awards for being a work of art, but it does the job. Now, the last place you need to cut when doing this swap is on the front panel, because the inlet manifold of the K20 would be touching the front panel otherwise, so I had to do another cut here as well. And we got our, don't forget, clutch release bearing.
Nice.
So the next task was to fit our new Exidi clutch. Once our new clutch was aligned, I could simply bolt the pressure plate into place. And then it was just a matter of getting the gearbox fitted. Now the final job we had to do before getting this engine in the Jazz was a bit of welding. Now I can't weld for the life of me, so I gave it to the professionals at the exhaust company. And if any of you need custom exhausts made for your car, these guys are the best in the game, and I'll leave a link to them in the description of this video.
Right, so we're at the point now where the engine is ready to go in the car. We're really close. So we're going to use these new engine mounts from Hasport. So essentially, that's going to sit on there like that. And then that is going to sit on there like that. That's our first mount. And then our second mount is this one, which sits on top of there when the nuts are off. And then our final engine mount will be this one, which I believe will sit that's where it will sit. So yeah, we've got 3 engine mounts. We're gonna lift the car down, get the engine in. That's the plan. Yeah, we're close now.
So, ladies and gentlemen, this is it. All I had to do now was bolt up engine mount number 1 and engine mount number 2, and then we could start the process of lowering the car over the engine. This is the moment everyone's been waiting for. It's the moment where this TikTok comment and the 54,000 people that voted for it finally get what they asked for. A Honda Jazz with a Civic Type R engine mounted into it. If this is not worth a subscribe right now, then I don't know what is. If you haven't already, make sure to smash that subscribe button and also like the video. Now, the trick to getting the engine in was to have Tom on the lift controls, lowering it really slowly. Meanwhile, I could watch whether the engine was going to hit anything on the chassis, and I could make tiny adjustments to the position of the engine until it was lined up perfectly, and then we could lower the chassis over the engine. And once we'd done up engine mount number 1 and engine mount number 2, the engine was then in. So with the wind in our sails from just getting the engine in, Tom and I then had to get the exhaust manifold into place, and then we also had to get the subframe in. The reason why we had to get the exhaust manifold on this early is because it's impossible to fit after you fit the subframe, and once that was done, we could then mount up engine mount number 3.
Well, this feels like a little bit of a successful moment. The K20 is in the Honda Jazz, and it is it is looking like a certified race car. The subframe's in, everything's been mounted up. We've got our Hasport mounts there, and also just down the back there. So yeah, all we need to do now is get the Jazz on the trailer, get it back to the unit, and then connect everything up that we need for the first start. So that's the plan.
We're driving cars on a Mars tonight. We're blasting off to the stars tonight. We wanna go, go.
Right, so the Jazz is now back from the exhaust company and it is officially Operation Get the Car Started. I want this K20 purring by the end of this video and I'm not going to leave this unit until it starts. So we've got a few jobs we need to get onto. The first of which I think I'm going to tackle is the wiring, and then we can move on to the remaining jobs. Right, so this is our K20 swap wiring harness, and essentially what we have to do now is a little bit of repinning or wire repinning from the standard Jazz body loom to these two little connectors here so we can use things like the fuel pump.
Now, essentially what this is doing is connecting the necessary parts of the body loom on the Honda Jazz to the new K20A ECU. Stuff like the rev gauge, the engine management light, and the fuel pump are all a part of the standard Jazz body loom, which all need to be fed into our new K20A ECU for them to function. Now, to connect the engine loom up to the ECU, Tom passed it through the firewall, which meant I could then get the necessary connectors from the engine loom and plug them into the ECU. So now the ECU was fully plugged in, we then decided to do things in a bit of a weird order. So the next job I decided to tackle was filling the engine up with oil, and then I needed to replace the old oil filter with a new one.
So I need to take out the old oil filter now, and I think I can reach my hand down there. We did undo it before, didn't we? So
yeah,
I should, in theory. Right, I've got it. This is a bit precarious. Right, I've dropped it on the floor.
So after what seemed like a long time, we did finally manage to get the oil filter in, but we definitely made it a bit more difficult for ourselves doing it after the engine install. Then we moved on to the next job, which was getting the inlet manifold on for the final time.
Boom.
right.
This job is a good one.
Oh, this clearance, not
Mate,
lots.
it is beautiful.
There's clearance
It's
there,
like we
though.
are professionals.
And then we had to worry about how we were going to run the fuel lines. Now, we didn't actually buy fuel lines before this, so we employed the bodge of the century. Now, essentially what we did was we put an old piece of AC line and used it as kind of a joining pipe for two pieces of old fuel line. And once we got this new masterpiece installed, it looked impressively not bodged, which I was very happy with. But all jokes aside, don't worry, this is not going to be permanent. It's just to get the car running in this video. But even so, the engine bay was really starting to come together. And then the final job to get the K20 running was to fit the engine loom. That's all the connectors for the coil packs, the injectors, the sensors, the starter motor. And this job is fairly easy because it's pretty intuitive where things are supposed to go, and all of the plugs can only be plugged into the correct place. So it is fairly simple.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, we are about to try and start the Jazz for the first time since this engine has been fitted. I'm very nervous. I don't know really what to expect. We fit the bare minimum to this engine to make it start. There's no belts, no drive shafts, no cooling system. But in theory, with the loom and with the fuel line, this engine should now start. So we're going to give it a go. After all the hard work, I'm really keeping my fingers crossed that this starts, so let's try.
So, ladies and gentlemen, this is it. I've spent thousands of pounds on this engine swap, and Tom and I have put hours and hours of blood, sweat, and tears into making this work. This moment now, finding out whether this engine will start, will dictate whether all of that time, money, and effort was worth it, or whether we need to go back to the drawing board.
Okay,
I'm gonna
this is actually going to stress me the hell out.
give me 2 seconds while I bodge the throttle position sensor so we have throttle position.
Okay,
Yeah,
it's on, it's beeping.
cool.
Well, it cranks.
It cranks. That's good.
That is good news.
I don't think we got fuel.
No,
I don't know. I heard
the fuel pump. I heard the fuel pump.
I heard fuel pump there. Me, that's loud. Kill it for a second. Give it prime the fuel pump again. I didn't hear it that time.
I didn't hear it that time either.
Try again. Off and on. So when I say prime the fuel pump again. No, go for it again. Keep trying the fuel pump.
So the engine cranked, which was good news, but it seems we were having a real problem with fuel. The reason why Tom and I thought this was because we only heard the fuel pump prime one time, making us think that something was stopping the engine from getting any fuel pressure. Now we rechecked back over our wire pin that we did earlier on in the video, because that wire pin was responsible for the fuel pump. But that seemed all okay, so we were really struggling to find out what was the problem here. So just to double check that it was indeed a fuel problem, Tom sprayed a bit of brake cleaner into the intake. Now brake cleaner acts just like fuel, so if the car started here, we'd be able to confirm that it was indeed a fuel problem.
That should be starting, no?
Yeah.
I'll give it another spray.
But still, absolutely nothing. Now Tom and I were really confused because this meant that it wasn't a fuel problem. Not only were we not getting any fuel pressure because the fuel pump wasn't priming, but we also weren't getting any spark. So we were very confused indeed, until Tom spotted something.
Right, I take this back. It wasn't a problem with anything other than the fact that we hadn't bloody put down this earth wire. That is why it didn't start. We just heard the fuel pump prime when we connected that. So all we have to do, let's bolt these down as well, Tom. I think we should. Let's just bolt those down and then put that earth wire. Oh, I can see it sparking. Yeah, boom, then sorted. Right, that's the plan.
So this seems to make sense. An earth wire that's not connected would 100% make us lose spark and fuel pressure. So all that was left to do was to do this earth wire up and cross our fingers.
Okay, come on, baby, come on. You want to start? Don't do anything weird, Tom.
I'm so excited.
All right, come on, baby. Oh, yes! Yes! Fine. Come on, yes! 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 Come on!
So good.
Yes! Woo! Bro, it works perfectly.
Also, you were at the wrong end. Fire came out the back of the
I saw it. I saw the fire, yeah. Just leave him for a second. That's unreal.
Oh my god. We have a K20 Jazz.
My heart is genuinely pumping right now.
And that's not just the monster.
Mate, bro, yeah, the monsters died off about an hour ago. I saw the fire come out the back as well. That's crazy. It idled so bloody well as well. Literally, you and me did that. That's crazy.
Mint, so we got the timing right.
Oh, we did the timing right as well. So there we have it. Rishi, the Honda Jazz, is now officially part of the Type R gang. This is soon to be the Jazz Type R. It now has a working K28 engine. I'm absolutely ecstatic with that. Tom and I have definitely got the award for the most awkward high five, but either way, I'm so over the moon with this. This has been one of my favorite projects I've ever undertaken and also the most challenging. We are a day or two's work away now from making this a fully working, driving Honda Jazz, and taking this to the Nürburgring is going to be so much fun. I am so happy. Honestly, this is awesome. I'm really happy with this. So anyways, with all of that said, make sure to drop a like on this video and subscribe if you haven't already. I'm trying to get to 100K before the end of the summer. So make sure to smash that subscribe button because it also helps me give you crazy car content like this. And with all of that said, I'll catch you guys in the next video.